Hello, everybody. This is Pascal from Neutrality Studies, and today I'm joined by my colleague and friend Heinz Gärtner. Heinz is a lecturer in the Department of Political Science at the University of Vienna and the Danube University. He was the academic director of the Austrian Institute for International Affairs and a fellow at the Johns Hopkins University. Heinz, thank you very much for coming online today.
Good morning, Pascal.
Good morning. So I would like to talk to you about mainly about BRICS, but also a little bit more general about what's happening currently with these new blocs that are emerging. So we've just seen a few days ago on the 24th, the end of that Brics Summit in Johannesburg. Now, can you maybe give us your personal opinion, how you interpret this meeting? What does it mean for international relations? And especially this bombshell announcement that 6 new members will be added, 2 of which are very interesting, Iran and Saudi Arabia, that are actually, until just a few months ago, they were like arch enemies. And then China comes in and helps to broker some form of agreement between them. And now they're both joining at the same time that emerging bloc. What do you make out of this?
Yeah, thank you, Pascal, for the invitation. Your question is basically twofold. The first question would be about the relevance of the BRICS meeting and the BRICS altogether. And the second, of course, is more specific about this extension by new members, and especially Iran and Saudi Arabia, which, as you pointed out, is an important development for diplomatic reasons. But first of all, of course, the BRICS are an important factor. So it's an important factor. They have about 40% of the world population now, moving with new members more towards 45%. And they have about 30% of the world economic production. Compared, the BRICS understand themselves, of course, not as an anti-American group, but they want to provide alternatives to the US-dominated world economy, but also world politics. And compare this data to the US, of course, the US only has about 5% of the world population and about 15% of the world economic production. So that shows that the BRICS countries are a very important factor in the future. Of course, they are heterogeneous. They are not a bloc, they're not an alliance. There are members there which have conflicts with each other, like India and China, but they can coordinate. They can coordinate their economic activities. One example, of course, is the Economic Development Bank, where other countries, not only members, can join and joined as well. And it's one reason for this bank is to avoid the financial pressures by US sanctions and the pressures by the finance SWIFT system. So this is the economic importance. But as you said, it has also a political factor, political dimension, political and diplomatic. And one example, what you mentioned, is the new membership of Iran and Saudi Arabia. And we should not forget, in the beginning, a couple of months ago, it was in March, when China and facilitated the deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So that was China, a mediation of trying to get both on board. It was an group, it was an agreement in the making already, because Iran and Saudi Arabia already had some meetings before. But China seized a diplomatic opportunity to be the facilitator. So both the EU and the US missed this opportunity for different reasons, but both countries, Iran and Saudi Arabia recognized China. And now we have all these three countries in the BRICS. And we can expect in the future that we see more diplomatic initiatives coming out from the BRICS countries. We saw this already with a peace proposal by Brazil on the Ukraine, but also the Chinese peace proposal on Ukraine, on the Ukrainian war was rejected by the US right away, which was I think it was too mature to reject this, because there were very important points where you could start a mediation in a peace process in Ukraine. So, and now on China did this facilitation between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and we can expect more. We can expect more, and it's an initiative by the global South and East, independent from the North. So we in the media hear always it's the West against the BRICS. It's not the West, because the BRICS are not an anti-Western group. We have countries there which like to cooperate and have good relations with the US, like India, Brazil, South Africa. And so that's not an anti-Western alliance, but it's an alternative. It's an alternative, and it's not only South, it's also reaching out to the East. And it's global South-East alternative to the North, which is more or less represented by the G7. And we had this meeting not long ago, which was more trying to build an anti-Chinese, anti-Russian grouping. So the BRICS are not an anti-alliance against anything, but they coordinate their activities not only economically but also diplomatically.
Although Ben Norton recently made a very interesting video in which he discussed that there are two strains inside the BRICS, Russia and China, that would like to position the BRICS more as an anti-West, and as you correctly said, Brazil and South Africa and India, that both would like it to be more neutral. So apparently, if we believe him, then there's some internal disagreement on where it should go. But doesn't it look as if, though, rather this neutral position will probably win out, especially now with Saudi Arabia and Iran on board? And one more question then. I mean, the United States right now is trying to broker some kind of very weird agreement between Saudi Arabia and Israel, in order also to convince Saudi Arabia to reinstate the petrodollar, right? So is now Saudi Arabia's membership in BRICS basically the death blow to these initiatives, or do you still think that it is possible that maybe there will be a Saudi Israel deal is on the horizon as well?
There are several questions. First of all, of course, there are attempts by the big member states of BRICS to influence the agenda. There's no question about it. And if you listen to President Putin's speech as well, of course, he wanted to get some legitimization of the Ukraine war, but he didn't really get. So more or less, these countries, and especially Russia, members like others. So the BRICS decide on consensus. So in that case, the China and Russia have the same, at least formal vote. And the BRICS states, they are not really influenced by Russia's wishes to get support for the Ukraine intervention, because they all stress all the time the territorial integrity and sovereignty. That was the first point also in the Chinese peace proposal. And that what the countries also pointed out in the debate about the UN resolutions on Ukraine war, that they want to keep the territorial integrity and sovereignty. So they do not in majority support the sanctions against Russia, but they condemned the intervention. So many of them voted against the intervention. So Russia does not really have this big say in the BRICS arrangement. But Russia is a junior partner because Russia's economy is about the size of Australia's economy. So most of the other BRIC countries are much, much stronger than Russia. Of course, Russia offers them individually, bilaterally, arms deliveries. So that's many why they want to keep good relations with Russia as well. Many countries of the global south, especially. So Russia has an influence, but in the BRICS, more or less, it's not the big ones which set the agenda. China is economically strong, of course, and they have the Belt and Road Initiative. They have the Global Development Initiative, and countries want to participate in this. And here, of course, the BRICS, together with China, have some advantages now towards the European Union, because also when it comes to digital investment, also the green technology, what we forget in the West. So environment and climate was a big point on the agenda of the BRICS. So they are cooperating with China in that case. So China, of course, economically has some impact on the BRICS countries, but they are too individual to just to get forced to do something by the big states. So your next question is about the Middle East. The Middle East, that's interesting, yeah, because the US and European missed the opportunity to mediate this deal because of President Biden has this ideology, autocracies versus democracies, and they cannot deal with Iran at the moment. In fact, they deal with Saudi Arabia, they have relations with Saudi Arabia, but it was impossible for the US to broker this deal. And for similar reason, because the European Union supported very much the opposition in Iran, that Iran could not accept the European Union as a mediator. But under President Trump, of course, some Arab states, the Emirates and Bahrain and Sudan and Morocco, they come to an agreement, the so-called Abraham Accords. But in the Middle East, it was very much designed as an alliance against Iran. So Arab states and Israel against Iran. And then, of course, Iran was working in the background with the other Arab states to have an agreement as well with them. So not only Saudi Arabia, but also the Emirates, which mitigated the impact of this anti-Iranian alliance, which, by the way, ignores the rights of the Palestinians altogether. And now, of course, the US is trying again to get Saudi Arabia on board. Saudi Arabia is not on the board of the Abraham Accords very much because of the Palestinian issue, because the Abraham Accords, they have lip services to the Palestinians, but do not do much about it. And now the Americans would promise, but it's not more as a lip service as well, if Saudi Arabia has an agreement with Israel similar to that of the Abraham Accords, Israel should respect some rights of the Palestinians when it comes to the two-state solution in the West Bank. No concrete requestment, but Saudi Arabia has its own requests. Of course, it wants to have security guarantees by the US. It wants to have its own nuclear weapon program. Its own nuclear program, enrichment program similar to that of Iran, and it wants to have a missile defense shield. I'm not so sure whether really the US can meet all these requests by Saudi Arabia. So I'm not so sure that this agreement, Saudi Arabia, Israel, will come about. I do think, however, the Arabs, the Saudi Arabia should recall its Arab peace plan of 2002, Land for Peace. That means recognizing of Israel on the basis that Israel recognizes the West Bank and independent Palestinian states in the borders of 1967. So that would be a deal, and my idea would be that could be a basis for a common cooperation also with Iran, because Iran is concerned about the Palestinians as well, and the Arab states. And it, of course, it would imply also the recognition of an independent Israeli state, but also an independent Palestinian state. But also the agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran does not address, I have to say this, does not address the Palestinian issue. And I think that's for different reasons, because Iran has a different agenda for the Palestinians as Saudi Arabia does. But there should be a common roadmap for the Palestinians with all the European Arab states together with Iran. And that would also imply, of course, recognizing Israel at the same time.
Okay, and do you see any danger that having Saudi Arabia and Iran inside the BRICS might block future initiatives of the BRICS when it comes to the Middle East? Is that a possibility? Because yeah, they have to take decisions unanimously, right? This is going to make it very hard. So do you understand the logic behind inviting both of them at the same time?
I think it would not have been possible without the deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia before. So now on this deal, there can be but this deal implies, of course, economic cooperation, technological cooperation in various fields. Also, it stresses the recognition of territorial sovereignty and integrity. And it says we want to resolve conflicts, which refers to the Yemen war. Of course, we have a ceasefire in the Yemen war now. Of course, there are issues of potential conflicts are still there. So we should not ignore it, but we have this issue of potential conflicts within the other BRIC states as well, as I mentioned, India and China. So at that point, I don't see that Iran and Saudi Arabia now could hamper cooperation within the BRIC states. On the opposite, they are model now for a diplomatic initiative taken by China. It can be taken by other BRIC states as well. I may just mention that China already headed the 6 party talks in the beginning of the 2000 years in North Korea, when it come to the North Korean nuclear program. And that was a multilateral undertaking led by China, including China, Russia, Japan, the US, and the both Koreas. The European Union was missing, and but it shows that China can mediate, and all these countries demonstrated they are able for diplomatic solutions, like China, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Brazil, South Africa. They're all able to broker diplomatic solutions. And I think the West is afraid of this as well.
Yeah, they're even better at it. I mean, you can see how peace is kind of breaking out, and especially Washington and Brussels, they're both reacting allergically to it, right? Washington was very much criticizing this agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And the other thing is BRICS, and let's not forget about that, within the 6 new members, we also got Ethiopia and Egypt, and they also have conflicts because of the Nile River. But the BRICS now bring these two into the same group again. So as you're saying, I mean, these seem to be forces that kind of want to try to mend ties within a new framework. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, but the ironic thing is that Washington benefits from this Iran-Saudi deal as well, because they want to have stability in the Middle East. So
really,
they criticize, but they benefit. So they did not.
The US wants stability in the Middle East.
They did not reject it because they benefit, but they of course are jealous that they are not the ones who were able to broker this deal. And as you said, there are conflicts within the grouping, but let me compare it to the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe, which was basically, I think, the most important diplomatic project after the Second World War in Europe.
The Cold War.
Sort of, but we had all kinds of conflicts. It was on the height of the Cold War, and the conflicts came into this conference processes, and it was possible to set it up. Of course, there were always setbacks, and Afghanistan invasion of the Soviet Union, but still it also contributed to the dissolution of the Soviet bloc as well, because it stressed also the possibility for the independence activities of member states. But that's a model that conflicts. We do not have the necessity of strong diplomatic initiatives with friends only. So if you do this with states which are not necessarily your friends, so that's.
I mean, the reason why I reacted a bit skeptical is because if you look at the grand strategy of the United States, that you also get in a lot of think tanks, and you read 𝗔𝗂𝘂𝘁𝗏 and so on, the idea is always divide and conquer, and make sure that these power centers remain divided. And let's not forget, in the CSCE, this process in Europe that was initiated by the Soviet Union and then mediated through the neutrals, especially through Finland, and the US then also jumped on board. But interestingly enough, these agreements, they often come from the outside, or the impulse for that comes from the outside. But sorry, I want to talk about one more issue, and that's how you, sitting in Austria, how do you perceive the reporting on this Brics Summit in Europe? What's the media echo that you are seeing? Because I got the feeling that the media here, I'm in Switzerland too at the moment, that it's kind of silent, as in nothing much to see here, and kind of just not report very much. Do you see that too, or am I just a bit biased?
Yeah, again, I think the European states and the European Union, again, a little bit taken by surprise, as they were with the Iran-Saudi deal. So they do not really know how to react. The European Union had relations with the BRIC members, mainly on a bilateral basis and mainly on economic issues, but they don't really know what to do with the grouping. So with the grouping, which is emerging also with diplomatic and political background, So what we hear in the media are somehow concerns that there is the competition with China, in the global south, and the European Union has to do something with it. They have been slow. The European Union has this global network initiative, the global network gateway initiative, which could not catch up with China's Belt and Road initiative and the development initiative by China. So there are concerns that China is winning the economic race. So there are concerns also that the European Investment Bank now will lose against the new development bank, that countries of the global south would rather turn to the new development bank, and they want to offer now the countries of the global south better conditions. So that's the perception by the European states. I don't think they have really seen the political and diplomatic potential. But I have to say, the Europeans, they missed all kinds of diplomatic initiatives they could have initiated. The European Union has excellent papers on the two-state solution in the Middle East. So nothing happened. It turned out to be an Netanyahu, Trump, Biden initiative without the Europeans. The same, just let me bring this one more example. The same when I mentioned the six-party talks about North Korea, the European Union was not there. So why should not the European Union start a new 6-7-party initiative now? The European Union is complaining that North Korean missiles can reach Europe, and they're building up a shield. Fine, but they're not building up a diplomatic shield. So why not start a 7-party initiative on Korea? So they're missing all kinds of possibilities. No wonder if China and the Brics states and others would step in and do this.
But do you think they could? Because it's like, I mean, Europe, not just the European Union, I mean, I include Switzerland in that, and the others, Europe just looks so utterly incapable of doing anything that is not closely coordinated inside NATO and with the United States. I mean, the Europeans weren't even able to save the 𝗟𝗂𝘂𝗁. I mean, it's only one country that withdrew in 2016, the United States, but they really crushed down hard on it, and they squeezed it to death. And the Europeans were there saying like, oh, maybe we would like to continue, let's build something, but then it crumbled that they never talked about it again. Even if they have a Middle East initiative, I mean, if the United States doesn't agree with that, I mean, none of these Brussels bureaucrats would ever dare to even try, maybe with the exception of Macron, but I don't see the Europeans as capable of actually doing independent diplomatic efforts at this point in time. In the Cold War, maybe, but not now. Or do you disagree?
No, I agree. So, but the European Union is a powerhouse economically when it comes to population as well. It's a bigger population than the United States. It spends a lot on arms. The strategic autonomy now is just an initiative to invest in more arms, but not invest in more diplomacy. So, and the 𝗟𝗂𝘂𝗁 is a case in point, as you said. No, so even so, the European Union would have the formal possibility to restart negotiations, because the chair, the Joint Commission of the 𝗟𝗂𝘂𝗁, and they restarted the negotiations in January 2021, only after President Biden said, no, yeah, let's talk about it again. So they could have done it earlier. So that's what you're saying. But, you know, some say, you need military capability in order to do diplomatic solutions or offer diplomatics. That's not true. Look at the countries, the small countries, which are quasi neutral, like Qatar and Oman. They have all kinds of diplomatic initiatives now to all kinds of conflicts. When it comes to Afghanistan, when it comes to Iran, even when it comes to Ukraine. So they offer good services what neutral states should do. No? They are small and not militarily capable as such. So it's possible if you are small that you offer or initiate diplomatic solutions. And the European Union is big and doesn't do so. So it's a pity. It could do so, but it missed many opportunities so far.
I agree. The Europeans, we somehow lost our guts in trying to do diplomacy. Heinz Gärtner, thank you very much for your insights.
You're welcome, Pascal. Thank you.